Now there might be times when you want to change the location of things, but you're not sure exactly what to change. Notice that we have a gap right here. So let's say that we wanted our navigation to bump right up against that image, but we're not exactly sure whether that's a margin from the nav or a bottom margin from the header or a margin or padding on the image. So one way to figure this out is to put borders around things. So I'm just going to put around the nav, the entire nav. Notice this is not just one element in it, but I'm going to put a border around here, and I'm just going to make it just big enough to see what's happening. I want it to be solid, I want it to be 1 pixel, and I'm going to make it red because then it will stand out for me. Okay, so I save that and I refresh, and there I get a border around the nav. Now notice what it did in my width. I was using up every piece of width there, so when I added those margins, that got too big. So let me just refresh that. It means we had it right at the edge. Okay, so now we see where the nav element is, so we know that this is not inside the nav, but it might be a margin. So now I need to do that. I'm going to do that same thing. Oops. I'm going to do the same thing around the header section. So I don't want it just around the image or the H1, but I want it actually around the entire header. And I'm going to make this one green, just so I can tell them apart. My whole goal here is just to see what's happening and where things are. So I do that. Okay, and notice where my header is up there just underneath that heading. All right, so what I'm going to do is first I'm going to put this nav inside the header. It's like, okay, if I want them really right next to each other, then I don't want them separated by these as in being in different block elements. So I'm going to move the nav and I'm going to put it after the heading 1, but inside the header. So see how it's inside the header? So now when I save it, watch how my lines change. So the green line actually goes down and around here. And so I don't have any space up here. I don't have any space here or here. I've got this gap here. And so it's between the image and the nav. So it doesn't appear that the nav has any margin. So let's look at that image. And if we look at our image that's in our header, it only has padding right. It doesn't have any padding bottom set. But if we scroll down here to see all the images, it has a 20 pixel padding bottom. And that's been done so that there's always a nice padding between the images and any text that comes after them. So that was added on a different style, and we want to keep that. So we want to make sure that our images have a nice padding bottom so they don't get too close. But on this particular image, we don't want that. So we go up into the header image, and we're going to change the padding bottom on this one to 0. And then when I refresh, and then it bumps up right against it. So now I can get rid of these lines that I used just for testing and get rid of the one that's in the nav and refresh and see what we came up with. Oh, and make that width back to use it all up with 208 and refresh. And there I was able to get rid of the gap. Now notice how that's just, it almost looks like it would be clean if I added 1 pixel. Let's see what happens if I add 1. And sometimes this you just play around till it looks just the way you want it in there. So I have to decide if I want a little bit of a gap or whether I really, really like them bumping right up against each other. So that's just a matter of preference here. And or you might want a little bit more space, but there they are right up against each other. So that gives you an idea of how to move things around, how to identify where things are so that you can move them to be where you want them.